I'm Ted Meyer in Joshua Tree, California.
I'm Adrian Anantawan, and I am in Boston right now.
Well, let me start by saying I am thrilled to have you here, a musician of your caliber. So you have played violin all over the world, the White House, the Olympics, you've studied at Yale and Harvard. So to have you here is really an honor. You were born missing your right arm from the elbow down. So it doesn't seem like a normal thing a 4-year-old would then say, I want to play violin.
The violin was present in our household. My dad had played the instrument as an amateur, so I had seen it, and it was something that was always the most beautiful instrument to me. It looked wonderful as a piece of sculpture and a piece of art. And I remember watching Sesame Street, and there was a man named Ishak Perlman who used crutches to get up the stage. Then he played the violin extraordinarily well. He had polio growing up, and I think that was the reason why he started the instrument. For me, it was seeing that representation of someone who just did things in different ways that inspired me to make those connections. I don't think I would have if it hadn't been a confluence of those two things happening at the same time. But from there, it was very much a matter of problem solving for my parents and for the rehabilitative engineers at Holland Bloorview Kids Rehab Center, where I got a lot of my prosthetic devices made that allowed me to really think and do things that were slightly outside of the box. In the end, no one thinks about someone with limb difference choosing the violin first, but for me, it was really because I had a lack of knowledge of what was needed in a practical sense to play the instrument that allowed me to pursue something that many people thought was not possible or perhaps just not the most realistic thing at first.
What exactly makes it so spectacular that you can do what you do? Because as someone who doesn't know violin, it just seems like this hand I understand. You do amazing things with this hand. To us, it sort of seems like you're just pulling back and forth. So what are we missing that the engineers and your skill makes up for?
The bow hand or the bow arm requires, at least in traditional pedagogy, a lot of joints everywhere from the first knuckle of your fingers to your wrist and your elbow and then your shoulder. It's a complex set of mechanisms that allow the bow to develop a sound on the violin that's optimal. I am missing pretty much all those joints up until my shoulder. For me, the concept of actually being able to use an adaptation to hold the bow in the first place is something that's inherently different. You're right in a sense that it doesn't take that much actually to make a good sound on the instrument. You have to have a combination of speed and weight. And for me, it was really just understanding how I needed to sound first and then allowing my body to make those adaptations from there that made the most pure form of education on the instrument because no one could really tell me from a very specific perspective, oh, this is what you do with every single joint in order to do something that was optimal. It was always starting from what a good sound was and then working backwards from there.
I think of Les Paul, who played guitar, but his hand, was sort of locked in place, and he adapted and made this amazing sort of new sound. Like, do you have a specific sound because of this?
Yes, because I use typically less bow. That already sort of densifies a little bit of the sound that I have. And then from there, I think that a lot of the uniqueness to my sound is more interpretive. And I think, like anyone else, using our personal experiences to guide the music automatically mixes in with how my body might adapt to the instrument and creates, hopefully, a unique musical identity that people find compelling as much as unique.
Did you see a difference between being the cute kid who's has a difficulty and is playing violin to all of a sudden you're being taken seriously? Was there a point where like, oh, that's cute, he wants to play violin, to, oh, he's the real deal?
I don't know if I explicitly experienced that as I was growing up. I'm sure that maybe people thought about that, but I think that I was very lucky that my parents sheltered me from a lot of what other people's expectations might have been and allowed me to focus on whatever I was doing in the moment. I think when I was about 13 or 14, though, that was when I started getting really serious about the instrument and then recognizing that perhaps I could do this on a level that could go to a professional sphere and think about studying it in college, especially. So for me, it was a mix of that and then just a very pure enjoyment of playing the instrument like anyone else, just being creative and problem solving and then having that community, especially as a violinist, there was always orchestra that I could play in that allowed me to feel very normal. Everyone has struggles on the instrument, and we're sort of all working together in different ways to be able to make harmony. And for me, that was a great equalizer. My music making was always taken seriously. I always treated myself as someone who didn't want to lower expectations or my own expectations or other people's expectations of me just because I did things a little differently. The violin was one of the first or few things that I was able to really think, well, the sky is always going to be the limit. And to this day, I really try to set the highest possible standards for myself and know that there's always room to grow.
You seem to have had a lot of partnerships. You had the engineers at the Children's Rehab Hospital, or the director of the Toronto Philharmonic is talking about adapting and how great you are. It seems like all the way along you've developed these partnerships to help propel you.
People like engineers and doctors were definitely interfacing with my music in a way that most violinists wouldn't have experienced early on. So being able to figure out the correct adaptation or prosthesis for me to hold the bow was definitely something that was unexpected, I think, from their perspective as well, to engage in something that was a more holistic sense of what healthcare was and is. To be able to engage with music is inherently part of healing, it's part of general health, and how do we continue to thrive as well. So that was a big partnership for me. My teachers were always incredible thought partners and ones that gave me the flexibility to be able to think in different ways. They still held, as I was saying before, very high standards for my playing and treated me as a musician first rather than a pity case. And that was also extremely helpful to be able to know that there are always going to be greater heights to achieve. And then now I think the partnerships really just happen with my colleagues, my professional sphere, people who inspire me every single day to play music. And these days I'm also doing a lot of teaching. So partnering with students who have disabilities who are really trying to enter the professional world. I remember being inspired with someone who had a disability to pursue an instrument. And my hope is that just being in this field and showing that representation, that there is a possibility of anything. I can only provide one example of what that looks like, but I'm hoping that as I continue to do this work and network with other musicians who have disabilities, that we can provide a large spectrum of stories just like what we're doing here, of what disability means, because in the end, we're all going to be disabled at some point through old age or have experienced a disability in our own right. And to think about music or the arts in particular as ways to be able to use that identity to enhance our art is something that is very compelling to me and I hope to continue to do for the rest of my
Like
career.
I'm more involved in the visual arts, but I'm seeing people with disabilities doing things on computers when they don't have the mobility, or sometimes even working in partnership, like saying to someone, add a little green, do this, do that. And I would think music, even if you don't have a lot of mobility, as long as you can think the notes, you can get them on a computer now and do amazing things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then with the advent of AI, the sky is the limit. I think it's really just using tools to express the imagination. And who's to say that the violin wasn't a piece of technology back then, where they're using trees and strings, and here we are now using these more advanced tools that will open up a world of access for people who have more profound disabilities than even myself. So you could be completely paralyzed, for instance, and all you need, as we were just saying, is an imagination and, in my estimation, a heart too, to be able to express. And that connection is something that's very exciting for future generations of music educators and students and just the world to experience.
Great. Well, thank you so much for talking to me.
It's a
And
pleasure.